All right, we're about to break down the mind of MrBeast, arguably the world's biggest YouTuber. But listen, this isn't really about his view counts or how much money he makes. We're actually using him as a clinical case study to understand the powerful and usually invisible psychological forces that drive, well, all of us. What if his insane generosity isn't just about being a good guy, but a masterclass in behavioral psychology? Let's get into it.
And that brings us to the real question here, the core of this whole analysis. When we're watching MrBeast, are we seeing some kind of modern-day saint, or are we actually watching something way more complex? A kind of high-functioning psychological engine, where the act of giving itself becomes an addictive substance, engineered for a hit that can never, ever truly satisfy.
And you're going to want to stick with me through this entire breakdown. We're going to explore the brain's reward centers, sure, but also some pretty dangerous psychological traps. More importantly, the key to unlocking these principles for yourself without the massive risk of burnout is something I'm saving for the very end. It's a fundamental shift in how you think.
Okay, so to get to the bottom of that big question, we have to start with the basics, our own biology. To really get the why behind MrBeast's relentless drive and, why it feels so darn compelling to watch, we need to look at our brain's most fundamental reward system.
It really all boils down to this thing called the helper's high. And yeah, it's a real, measurable, physiological state of euphoria. When you do something compassionate, your brain just floods your system with a chemical cocktail, and dopamine is playing the lead role. It's basically your brain's built-in way of saying, hey, that was good, do that again.
The physical effects are pretty incredible. You get that dopamine release, higher self-esteem, you name it. But look at that last point, because this is absolutely crucial. The high isn't just about the act itself. For a creator like MrBeast, a huge part of the reward comes from anticipating the reaction. His brain is literally wired to feed on the joy and surprise he creates in other people.
So, that biological reward, it's powerful stuff all by itself. But when you combine it with a very specific psychological mechanism, it gets supercharged into a seriously addictive engine. This is how basic kindness gets hardwired into something that acts just like an altruism slot machine.
And this, right here, is a core insight from our analysis. While we're all seeing record-breaking philanthropy, a behavioral psychologist sees something else entirely. The exact same reinforcement schedule that makes slot machines one of the most addictive technologies ever invented.
So, what in the world is it? It's called variable ratio reinforcement. And all it means is that the reward is unpredictable. You pull the lever on a slot machine, and you have no idea if or when a payout is going to come. That uncertainty, that's the key. It is the single most powerful behavioral conditioning tool known to science, period. And this is exactly why it's so addictive. It creates this frantic need to just keep pulling the lever. I mean, think about his videos. The unpredictable challenges, the random people who win. You just don't know who's going to get the prize or when. And psychologically, even a near miss, like watching someone almost win, it triggers the same reward centers in our brains as an actual win. We are being conditioned right there alongside him to crave that next hit of generosity. But here's where things get tricky. There's a serious danger here for any creator, or really for anyone who turns a passion into a profession. It's a psychological pitfall, and it's known as the Over-justification Trap.
It's called the over-justification effect, and what it is what happens when something you do purely for the love of it, your intrinsic motivation, gets hijacked by an external reward, like money or likes or views. The passion slowly starts to feel like a job, and if those external rewards were to suddenly disappear, well, the original joy you felt might just vanish right along with them.
So here's the crucial point. The moment you start doing an act of kindness for the social media post or chasing a passion for the paycheck, you're making a really dangerous trade. You're swapping a deep, internal, soul-level satisfaction for an external reward that's fragile and honestly can disappear overnight.
So how does someone like MrBeast manage these intense pressures without just collapsing? To get that, we have to go internal. It really helps to think of your mind not as one single thing, but as a kind of committee filled with different members who all want different things.
One of the loudest members of this committee is driven by what our sources call an incessant hunger. All the praise, the status, the views, it's all just psychic food, and the satisfaction is always temporary. The second it feeds on a 100 million view video, it's already looking around asking, okay, what's next? Where's the next meal? This creates a kind of black hole hunger that can never ever really be filled.
And this is where we meet the two dominant members of that internal committee, the self as producer and the self as consumer. The producer is the builder, right? The innovator who creates the whole empire. But the consumer is the part that feeds on the empire's rewards, the dopamine, the praise, all that psychic food. The genius of the MrBeast system is that he's engineered them to work together perfectly. The producer builds an incredible machine to feed the consumer, and the consumer's satisfaction fuels the producer to build even bigger. The danger? If the consumer's hunger grows unchecked, it can devour the whole system. And that leads to total burnout. And this, right here, brings us to the promise I made at the beginning. How do you actually manage this internal committee? How do you shift from being driven by that constant, exhausting hunger to being guided by a stable, internal sense of craft?
The entire key, the whole thing, lies in shifting the question you ask yourself. See, most of us are run by questions of hunger. How do I get more views, more money, more validation? But a truly resilient mind asks a noble question, like the one you see here. This simple pivot reframes the entire problem. It's no longer about feeding a need, it's about mastering a skill.
So how do you actually become this craftsperson of the mind? Well, there's a clear process. First, you develop what's called the observer. That's the part of you that can just step back and watch your urges for a dopamine hit come up without being controlled by them. Second, you learn to evaluate your execution, not your self-worth. A failure is no longer a personal flaw, it's just an unskillful data point that gives you information for the next try. This is how you make that critical shift from hunger to skill. And that, finally, allows you to become a true producer, someone who creates from a stable internal center, not from a place of frantic external need.
At the end of the day, altruism is a powerful drug, and those external rewards will always be tempting. But the true wealth isn't the prize money or the view count. It's discernment. It's understanding the code of your own mind, your own hungers, your own motivations. That is the one asset that can never be taken away from you.
So I'll leave you with a question to reflect on. Just take a moment and be really honest with yourself. What is your consumer self hungry for today? Is it validation, security, maybe just a little excitement? The first step to rewriting your own code is simply to learn how to read it.